When I saw that on my console, it's Capcom, I said, we're dead in the water. We're losing the computer. We're not going to be able to finish. So everybody just said, oh no.
For 50 years, the moon has kept its secrets. 12 men walked on its surface, all returned with the official story, except one. Charles Duke, the 10th man on the moon, was there for 71 hours. Quiet, measured, obedient to protocol, he said nothing for decades. But now, at 89, he's finally telling the story no one was supposed to hear. What he saw didn't match NASA's reports. It didn't match physics textbooks. It didn't even match what we believed was possible. Duke followed orders, told the world what they wanted to hear, until the silence became too heavy to carry. And what he's revealing now, after half a century of quiet, may change everything we thought we knew about the moon and about ourselves. The moon NASA hid. Before we dive into what Charles Duke revealed, it's essential to understand who he was and why his words matter. Duke wasn't a thrill seeker or conspiracy theorist. He was the perfect NASA astronaut, trained, disciplined, and technically brilliant. Born in South Carolina, son of a naval officer, he earned his pilot's license before he could vote. By the time he joined NASA in 1966, he was already a decorated Air Force test pilot. His calm voice guided Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin during the historic Apollo 11 landing. But it was on Apollo 16, his own mission in 1972, that Duke stepped onto the moon himself, spending 71 hours on the surface. The mission, on paper, was flawless. He and Commander John Young explored the Descartes Highlands, collected samples, and conducted experiments. But the footage tells a different story, one NASA never explained. Watch closely and you'll see it. Duke, standing motionless, staring off camera. When Young asks if he's okay, there's a hesitation before Duke replies, Yeah, I'm fine, just looking. Looking at what? No one knows. The transcripts are blank, the reports say nothing. And for decades, neither did Duke. After returning to Earth, Duke gave interviews about geology, spaceflight, and the awe of seeing Earth from the moon. But the parts that didn't fit, the moments that couldn't be explained, he left out. He left NASA in 1975, turned to business and ministry, and became a public speaker. Open about his life, his faith, his struggles, but never about what he truly saw on the moon, until now. The silence breaks. Something shifted around 2015. Duke, now in his 80s, began speaking differently. In interviews, he drifted beyond the clean, rehearsed stories he'd told for decades. Slowly, he started describing things that didn't belong in the tidy version of Apollo 16, details he'd kept hidden since 1972. First, it was the light. Lunar sunlight should be pure white, maybe a hint of yellow. No atmosphere means no scattering. But Duke said what he saw didn't make sense. Blues, purples, not visor reflections, not artifacts. Actual color shifting in the light itself. He looked away, looked back. The hues had changed. Then came the sounds. By physics, the moon should be silent. No air, no medium, no noise. But Duke heard things. Not mechanical whirring from his suit, not radio chatter. Tones, frequencies, sometimes musical, sometimes jarring and wrong. He asked John Young if he heard them too. Young said yes, neither reported it. They knew it would end their careers. Duke spoke of an overwhelming feeling, being watched. Every Apollo astronaut, he claimed, would admit to it privately. A presence that wasn't human, but aware, vast, cold, like standing under an unseen gaze the size of the cosmos. Even time itself didn't behave. Tasks felt like they stretched or compressed. 20 minutes passed in what felt like 2, or the opposite. Seconds that dragged like hours. Duke and Young would compare notes. Their clocks never matched their instincts, not once. And it wasn't just memory. He was detailed, consistent, technical. He wasn't slipping. He was remembering clearly. In 2017, at a private Apollo reunion, the unspoken finally surfaced. Duke and the surviving moonwalkers shared what they'd buried for years. They hadn't all seen the same things, but they had all seen something, and none of it matched what the world was told. Structures. In 2019, during a quiet interview, Duke was asked a direct question. had he seen anything on the moon that NASA never acknowledged? His answer came without hesitation. Yes, absolutely. What followed was the most explosive claim of his career. He and John Young had driven the lunar rover about 6 kilometers from their landing site. Their objective was a crater designated for sampling. But something caught Duke's eye on the horizon, a shape, geometric, too precise to be natural. He pointed it out. Young saw it too. They veered off course. What they found was unlike anything recorded in NASA logs. A structure, wall-like, angular, seemingly constructed. It extended roughly 100 meters, partially buried in the regolith, both ends disappearing into the moon's surface, made of blocks, dust-covered, weathered, despite the moon having no weather. It looked ancient. They called Houston, described it, waited. The reply came after a long delay, much longer than the usual transmission lag. Houston told them to proceed with their scheduled task. No questions, no curiosity, just a quiet command to stay on mission. But Duke and Young were prepared. They took photos, dozens of them. Context shots, close-ups, clear evidence. They brought that film back to Earth. And then, nothing. The photos were never released, not to the public, not to scientists. Duke asked about them for years. NASA's answers changed each time. They were classified for technical reasons, or lost, or too poor in quality. But Duke was certain. He took those shots himself. They were clear. They showed what they saw. The most unsettling part? The age. The structure wasn't new. It bore impact marks. It had eroded edges. It looked like it had been there not for decades, but for millions of years. The conclusion was impossible to avoid. Someone, or something, had been on the moon long before us. The evidence. After that interview went public, the backlash hit fast. Skeptics dismissed Duke's claims as confusion, memory distortion, or a craving for attention. Some blamed cosmic radiation for brain damage. Others called it science fiction. But Duke never backed down. He doubled down. He added new details. He described trails in the lunar dust, patterns that looked too fresh, too deliberate. No known process could have formed them. He recalled glints of metallic or glass-like material embedded in crater walls, mismatched with lunar geology. He spoke of invisible boundaries, zones on the surface where the feeling of presence intensified or vanished entirely, like walking from room to room in an unseen structure. There was interference too, radio bursts where there should have been silence. Apollo 16 reached parts of the moon entirely shielded from Earth's transmissions. But Duke reported musical tones, unnatural harmonics on frequencies that physics said should be dead quiet. And then there were the moments of clarity, strange, ephemeral episodes when he stood alone and suddenly understood things, not in words, but in pure knowledge, about the moon, about its past, about their role in being there. Then it would fade, leaving only the certainty that, for a brief moment, he knew something humans were never meant to know, that they were not exploring. They were being observed, tolerated. As wild as it all sounded, Duke wasn't alone. Buzz Aldrin once mentioned a monolith on Phobos, Mars's moon. Edgar Mitchell had long spoken about extraterrestrial contact. Al Worden stated publicly that humanity might be descended from alien life. These weren't crackpots. These were astronauts, men trusted to carry the future of science in their hands. Different missions, different years, same themes. Anomalies, structures, awareness, and silence. The cover-up that isn't. In 2023, Charles Duke was asked the question everyone wanted answered. Had NASA covered it all up? Had there been a deliberate, coordinated effort to hide evidence of something non-human on the moon? Duke's answer surprised almost everyone. He didn't describe secret councils or shadowy meetings, no underground rooms deciding humanity's fate. Instead, he described something quieter and more unsettling: institutional paralysis. According to Duke, NASA didn't know what to do with information that didn't fit the scientific framework it had spent decades building. The moon was supposed to be a dead rock, simple, predictable. Releasing data that contradicted that narrative wouldn't just raise questions, it would undermine the agency's credibility, funding, and authority. So, instead of confronting it, they set it aside. Photos that raised unanswerable questions were classified, transcripts marked corrupted, anomalies labeled processing errors. Not out of malice, Duke said, but fear. Fear of admitting they didn't understand what they had found. He called it institutional cowardice. When asked what he believed the structures truly were, Duke paused. He didn't claim certainty, only conviction. He believed the moon was inhabited in the distant past. Not recently, not visibly, but long ago. Something intelligent, something capable of building structures that survived millions of years of impacts. Maybe they lived there. Maybe they used it. Maybe they built the moon itself. It sounded impossible. Duke knew that. But after seeing what he saw, impossibility stopped being a barrier. The real question became how humanity would face a reality that shattered its place in the universe. Charles Duke doesn't need anyone's approval anymore. He's lived a full life. Astronaut, test pilot, public speaker, man of faith. At 89, he says there's only one thing left that matters: the truth. 12 men walked on the moon. Every one of them saw things that didn't match the official narrative. For decades, they stayed silent, not out of fear of retaliation, but fear of ridicule, fear that no one would believe them. Now, Duke is done with silence. He says we were never alone, that something was already there, long before us, that we found evidence and then buried it because it didn't fit our story of the universe. And he's asking us to look again. NASA still holds thousands of unreleased photos from Apollo 16. Gaps remain in the mission transcripts, always during the moments astronauts later described as strange. Former employees whisper of data hidden for later analysis that never saw the light of day. But the most compelling evidence, the consistency. Duke's claims match those of others. Not perfectly, but unmistakably. From different missions, years, landing sites, they all returned with the same message. Something is off. Something is missing. Something is being kept from us. The moon is still up there, watching, quiet, waiting. The question now isn't whether the truth exists, it's whether we're finally ready to face it.